Let's get straight to it. You're going to sign tonight, my son said. His voice came out low, polished, sharp like a newly honed blade. Sign what, Lucas? I asked. What's right? What should have been done long ago? He didn't meet my eyes. He stared at my plate instead. Mum's share, the house, the investments, you kept everything and pretend it's normal. That topic again. Whenever the table was set, the subject of money reached my ears faster than food reached my mouth. After my wife died, I had a heart attack. During my recovery, my son and daughter-in-law went with me to every doctor, every bank meeting. At first, I thought it was care. But as my strength returned, I started to see their patience thinning, their disappointment leaking through every polite word. The smell of slightly burned garlic rose from the pan in the kitchen and filled the dining room like a warning signal. Smoke before the battle. The table was immaculate, the cloth crisp, the glasses aligned under the chandelier's pale light. Yet I felt like a man sitting in a courtroom, not his own home. He pushed a leather folder toward me. The clasp snapped shut with a dry sound, the kind that travels through the bone. Beside it lay a silver pen, gleaming like a small projectile. Camilla, my daughter-in-law, tapped her spoon against her plate. Cling! Then she smiled without showing her teeth, the kind of smile you practice in front of a mirror. We came prepared, she said, swirling her glass of wine, as if reading our fate in its dark legs. It's just paperwork, nothing complicated, but it needs to be done tonight. The word paperwork hung in the air, dust made of arrogance and disdain. The food was growing cold, the garlic's bitter scent now mixed with the acid of the tomato sauce, as if memory itself refused to leave. I touched the folder with the tips of my fingers. Smooth leather, yes, but it carried something heavier than paper, the quiet urgency of people eager to erase me. I'll read it, I said at last. No, you won't, Lucas cut in, raising his chin, the same gesture he used as a child when he wanted to look brave. Only now, that chin pointed at me like an accusation. You'll sign. Reading is your excuse to stall. Stall what? I asked softly. The clock swallowed a beat between ticks. What's fair? He pointed a finger at me. His nail struck the table. You're holding what's not yours. Mum didn't die for you to play owner of everything. The word died entered the room like a draught of cold air, snuffing out the faint blue flame in the kitchen. Camilla straightened her napkin, smoothing the fabric with exaggerated care. Please, don't make a scene, she said. We just want what's right, what's always been ours. Outside, I heard the elevator hum, a dog barking 2 floors down, the city breathing in sync with my restraint. The fork grew heavy in my hand. I placed it down gently, as though laying a piece of myself on an altar no one prayed to anymore. Rights must be proven, I said, and signatures don't come from threats or from haste, Lucas scoffed, that short, dismissive snort of a horse resisting the bridle. You'll sign because you don't have a choice, he said, leaning over the table, breath tinged with wine and resentment. The truth is already on our side. Mom's family paid for this house. You just enjoyed it. That ends now. Camilla nodded, her lips curving into a half-smile that felt like rust running through my veins. You retired early, didn't you? She said, voice soaked in sugar and poison. It's pretty, this speech about honor. Prettier still when you give back what isn't yours. The pen on the table stared back at me. My breathing shrank to something invisible. My jaw tightened. The clock kept ticking, steady, relentless, like the march of soldiers. The air smelled of damp walls and freshly opened wine. For a moment, I thought the chandelier might crash down from the tension above our heads. If I sign without reading, I said slowly, measuring each syllable like gunpowder, who guarantees that what's inside isn't a trap? You're calling us thieves. Lucas snapped his fingers and clackin', the sound slicing through the silence. They say some people get stingy with age. Looks like that's you. You've turned into a burden, Dad, a blockade. Camilla tilted her face slightly. The earring she wore caught the light like a blade. Not every man in uniform is a man of honor, she whispered, calm and deliberate, like someone dropping poison into tea. I placed my hand on the folder again. I could feel the faint pulse in my wrist. I looked into my son's eyes. I didn't see hunger there, only a thirst for control. My chair creaked as I leaned back. Every bone in my body wanted to rise and leave, but I stayed. Because when you yield to the first shout, you start living on your knees for the next. I won't sign anything at this table, I said, without raising my voice. A table is for sharing food, not passing judgment. Then we'll make it a courtroom, Lucas shot back, pulling his phone from his pocket. The law's on our side. The law isn't a short video, I said, and family isn't an audience. Camilla chuckled, a brittle, crystalline sound. Family is a contract too, dear, and contracts must be fulfilled. She slid the pen toward me with one manicured finger. Let's be practical. Sign it. Save everyone the trouble. You don't want conflict, do you? The windows were closed, yet I could swear I smelled rain approaching. The air thickened. Their words seemed to change the texture of oxygen. Lucas's fork scraped against the plate, a metallic shriek that felt like a verdict. When he looked at me again, it wasn't a request. It was an order disguised as reason. You taught me never to bow my head, he said, the irony cutting deep. So prove it. Sign and face it. I ran my finger around the rim of my glass. It sang a thin, high note, as if the glass itself had something to say. The wine smelled of dark fruit and restrained fury. I took a small sip, washed down the silence, and set the glass back with care. I face things, I said, but I don't surrender to blackmail. Blackmail? He slammed his palm on the table. The plates rattled. A slice of tomato slid across the cloth. You'd rather let everyone think you're hiding something? I can tell the rest of the family, the neighbors, the press. Tell whoever you like, I said, straightening my back until the chair protested. I don't negotiate with volume, only with truth. Camilla crossed her arms, her tone suddenly bureaucratic. Fine, we'll do it your way. Lawyers, courts, whatever it takes. The cost is yours, the exhaustion too, and the shame. Lucas shoved the folder closer again. The pen now touched the edge of my plate, its tip stained with sauce. I picked it up between two fingers, the way you remove an insect from your crop, and set it aside. Take the papers, I said, the same calm tone I'd once used to command angry soldiers. If I ever sign, it'll be after reading every line and every lie between them. You don't trust your own son, he said, not as a question but an accusation. What kind of father are you? Somewhere in the building, a pan clattered to the floor, a metallic echo that sounded like punctuation to our domestic war. A wisp of steam escaped the kitchen, carrying that first burned scent of garlic again, the smell that announces all other disasters. The kind that doesn't surrender out of fear, I said, and knows that love isn't measured in ink. The silence that followed was heavy, resting on my shoulders like a wet coat. Camilla spoke next, soft as velvet. Last time I'll ask, yes or no. I felt the edge of the table under my fingertips, old wood, scarred by years of dinners and laughter now gone. Every mark whispered the same thing. Stay. I won't, I said. The clock struck the next second as if stamping a decree. Lucas snatched up the folder, the pen slipped and hit the floor with a hollow click. He didn't pick it up. He stood, shoving the chair back with his knee. Then prepare yourself, he said, eyes burning but empty. You were never the owner of our story. Never. Camilla rose too, checking her phone, like she'd just received orders from an invisible command. It's just bureaucracy, remember? She said, smiling coldly. You're the one who turned it into war. The door sighed open, then closed with the same sterile politeness they'd brought to dinner. The corridor smelled of expensive perfume and urgency. I stayed seated, looked at the crumbs, the plate, the empty chair beside me. I ran my hand across the tablecloth as if tracing a relief map of years gone by. The clock kept going. Only now every beat whispered something different. Resist. I rose slowly, turned off the gas flame still flickering, tired and blue, washed my plate without hunger, just habit. The warm water steamed, fogging the window for a second. When it cleared, I was still standing there, whole despite the fracture. The folder had left with them, but the threat remained. I placed it on the highest shelf of my chest, the one reserved for decisions not to be rushed. Outside, the street breathed. There was time, there was night, and above all, there was still my will, unbroken. If you've stayed with me until now, I thought, throat tightening, tell me there are still people who know the difference between a family table and a courtroom. The wind tapped gently against the glass. I straightened the chair back into place, and I waited, already hearing the next confrontation walking down tomorrow's hallway. Some people turn family tables into courtrooms. If you've ever felt something like this, or know someone who has, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this story touched you, walk with me, subscribe. There's much more to be told. I was never a rich man, at least not the way people measure wealth now. What I had was built with calloused hands and quiet mornings, discipline, patience, and the belief that a man's worth was in the steadiness of his word. I spent 35 years in uniform, not chasing medals. I never cared much for parades, but because serving gave me structure when the rest of the world didn't. The army taught me that silence can be stronger than shouting, and that respect is earned, not demanded. When I left the service, I thought peace would be simple, but peace, I've learned, isn't the absence of noise. It's the battle you fight inside your own home when everyone forgets what you've already given. When I met Helena, my late wife, she was everything I wasn't. Elegant, soft-spoken, from one of those families whose portraits hang in fading frames. But her world had already collapsed before I ever came along. Their estate was gone, debts had eaten the marble walls, and all that was left was her dignity, and the piano she refused to sell. We built our life quietly. No vacations abroad, no grand parties, just coffee at dawn, the sound of her music through the house, and the smell of bread she baked on Sundays. I used part of my inheritance, land that my father left me, and turned it into something steady, investments, properties, a foundation of safety. Helena didn't like to talk about money, maybe because she'd seen how it ruins people. I respected that. Lucas grew up thinking his mother's family had saved us. I never corrected him, not because I wanted credit, but because I didn't think it mattered. I thought that love would outlast ignorance. That was my mistake. When Helena passed, the house went silent in a way I wasn't ready for. The piano stopped singing. The mornings became long corridors of air and dust. I still set the table for two out of habit. Her chair stayed empty for months. People say time heals, but it doesn't. It only rearranges the furniture around your grief. Then came the heart attack. I remember the white ceiling of the hospital room, the sound of the monitor, the rhythm between life and regret. Lucas was there every day, Camilla too. They drove me to appointments, brought me soups, reminded me to rest. I thought it was love wearing the face of duty, but maybe it was duty wearing the mask of patience. When I started walking again, when my hands stopped trembling while signing the bank forms, that's when I noticed the change. Their kindness began to fade, replaced by the faint irritation of people waiting for something to be over. Sometimes I'd catch Camilla glancing at the documents in my study, pretending to tidy up. Lucas stopped talking about memories and started talking about assets. It began small, a question about the house title, then about the joint account Helena once had. One evening, I heard them whispering in the kitchen. The words were low, but one phrase carried through the air like a knife thrown true. He doesn't even realize how much of it is actually Mom's. That's when I knew they had rewritten history in their own minds. In their version, I was the custodian of something that never belonged to me. In mine, I was the man who had spent a lifetime providing and was now being quietly erased from the very foundation I built. I tried to reason with myself first. To think that grief makes people ungrateful, that they were still hurting in their own way. I told myself they'd remember one day who paid the bills, who fixed the roof, who never missed a tuition payment. I told myself 1,000 little lies so I wouldn't have to face the bigger one, that my own son no longer saw me as a father, but as an obstacle between him and what he thought was his inheritance. I started to notice things I'd once ignored. Camilla's tone when she spoke about modernizing the house. Lucas's sudden urgency in knowing where my documents were kept. Even the way they looked at my keys when I came home, as if my very presence was a locked door they wanted to open. There were moments I almost signed, just to make it stop, to turn the noise into silence again. But then I'd walk past the piano. It hadn't been played since the day Helena died. I'd rest my hand on the keys, cold and dust-covered, and remember her laughter. She never once asked where the money came from. She only cared that I came home safe. That memory kept me grounded. That memory reminded me, a man who gives without demanding is not a thief. Still, the weight of their stares began to follow me everywhere. At breakfast, when the toast was too dry. In the living room, when the news talked about inheritance laws. Even in silence, their eyes asked, "When will you let go?" But I wasn't holding on to money. I was holding on to meaning. Every tile, every piece of furniture, every photograph on those walls was part of the story Helena and I built. Signing it away would have been like erasing her name from our life. And if I did that, what would be left of me? So I waited, watched, listened, until that dinner, the one where patience ran out and the knives came out of words instead of drawers. The night where my son, my blood, looked at me and saw nothing but a ledger he wanted to balance. That's the thing about betrayal. It never shouts. It just arrives wearing the face of someone you love. After that dinner, silence didn't return. It changed shape. In the days that followed, Lucas and Camilla walked around the house like guests waiting for the host to leave. Their voices grew softer, more careful, but there was a stiffness beneath every sentence, the kind of calm that comes before a storm decides where to break. At breakfast, I found the newspaper already open to the finance section. My coffee cup was filled before I even sat down, as if they were performing a ritual to keep me still. Camilla began smiling more often, the sort of smile that hides a stopwatch behind the teeth. She'd ask things like, "Do you need help with the bills this month? Or should we organize your papers for you just in case?" I'd reply politely, "I'm fine." Always that same answer. Always a lie, but not the one she thought it was. I wasn't fine because the house had changed. My wife's photo, which used to stand beside the piano, was now on a smaller shelf, half hidden behind a vase. Lucas said it was just for space. But in that small rearrangement, I saw what they really wanted. Not order, but control. A rewriting of history that began with furniture and would end with ownership. Every time I tried to leave the house, for groceries, for a walk, someone offered to come along. If I said no, they asked why. If I said yes, I found myself being guided like an old man who'd lost his way home. I was 68, not senile. I could feel the weight of their hands hovering close, just enough to remind me that my independence was now a negotiation. Camilla started keeping a small notebook. I'd see her jot things down when I spoke. Dates, details, numbers I didn't recall giving her. One afternoon, I caught her in my study, pretending to dust. The drawer of my desk was slightly open, papers misaligned. She turned with a smile so quick it almost fooled me. Almost. "I was just cleaning," she said. "You keep so many old documents here. Maybe it's time to throw some away." I looked at her for a moment before answering. Some things are meant to stay, even if they've stopped being useful. That night, I heard her whispering with Lucas in their room, low, fast sentences, the kind people use when they're building a story. My name floated in the air once or twice like a stain that refused to dissolve. I didn't press my ear against the wall, though I could have. I'd learned in the army that knowing too soon can be worse than not knowing at all. Days turned into a slow kind of siege. If I paid a bill, Lucas asked to see the receipt. If I mentioned the lawyer who'd handled Helena's estate, Camilla wanted to update the contact info. Once, she even suggested moving the family finances to an online account she could help manage. I said no. Her lips twitched before she smiled again, the kind of smile that hides the sound of grinding teeth. "I'm only trying to make things easier for you," she said. "I know," I replied, though I meant the opposite. Even my health became a topic they controlled. Lucas booked my checkups before asking if I wanted them. Camilla insisted on coming along, sitting beside me during appointments, answering questions before I could open my mouth. "He forgets sometimes," she'd say to the doctor, soft, sympathetic. "We just want to make sure he's not overwhelmed." Forget, overwhelmed. Words that painted me in a shade of frailty that didn't fit my skin, but I let them talk. Sometimes silence is the only shield left when every defense sounds like guilt. One afternoon, I walked to the park by myself. I sat on the same bench Helena and I used to share after Sunday Mass. The trees had grown taller, the air colder. Children ran past with the same energy that used to make her smile. I took out my old watch, the one Lucas gave me when he graduated, and realized the battery had died. Time, it seemed, had stopped cooperating altogether. When I got back, the atmosphere felt rehearsed. Lucas was sitting at the dining table, papers neatly arranged. Camilla stood behind him, hands resting on his shoulders, like a lawyer posing for a photograph. "Dad," Lucas began, polite again, too polite. "We just need your signature on a few forms. Routine things. Bank authorizations, mostly." "Bank authorizations?" I repeated. "You told me all accounts were already settled." "They are," he said quickly. "These are just adjustments. You know how banks are, always updating policies." Camilla stepped in. "We just don't want any surprises later, especially with your health." "My health is fine," I said. "Of course," she answered, voice syrupy. "We just mean, what if something happens? It's better to have everything organized." I looked at the papers, but didn't touch them. The top page bore my name in bold, followed by words I didn't recognize. Legal language, the kind that looks harmless until it isn't. I glanced up. Their eyes were steady, rehearsed. I smiled, the kind of smile you give before pulling a trigger that only you can hear. "I'll have my lawyer look at it," I said. Lucas frowned. "That's unnecessary. He's too old-fashioned. We're just—" I raised a hand. "Lucas, when a man reaches my age, unnecessary becomes another word for safe." He clenched his jaw. Camilla's fingers pressed lightly on his shoulder, a warning. "Fine," she said. "Do it your way." But from that day forward, they stopped hiding the impatience. The smiles faded. The politeness turned brittle. The silence between us grew heavy enough to crack glass. I began noticing other changes, small, deliberate ones. My name disappeared from the electricity bill. The spare keys I kept by the kitchen were missing. Even my mail started arriving already opened. When I asked about it, Camilla shrugged. "Must have been a mistake. You know how mailmen are." Yes, I knew. And I also knew that betrayal rarely arrives with a confession. It seeps in, one missing key at a time. The nights got longer. I'd sit by the window, listening to the hum of the city, the ticking of the clock. That same relentless rhythm that used to soothe me. Now it only marked how fast I was being pushed aside. Sometimes I'd see my reflection in the glass, faint, ghostly, the face of a man who once commanded soldiers, now watching his own home turn into occupied territory. I'd whisper to the empty room, to Helena's memory, "If you were here, you'd know what they're doing. You'd see it." I started moving my documents, slowly, quietly. The will, the deeds, the certificates, all tucked away in places they wouldn't think to look. I even changed the locks, pretending it was for security reasons. They didn't question it, not yet. But I knew the storm was coming. I could hear it in Lucas's shorter sentences, in Camilla's rehearsed patience, in the way their voices stopped carrying warmth when they said my name. There's a moment in every battle when you realize defense alone won't save you. I reached that moment sitting at that same table, the one where garlic had burned and words had cut deeper than any knife. Only this time, the battlefield was quiet, the silence before the ambush. And I was ready. The morning it happened, the sky looked harmless, pale and still, the kind of light that lies before the fall. I remember thinking it would be a quiet day. I brewed my coffee, ironed my shirt, opened the windows to let in the sound of the street. The city was alive, but my house had turned into a waiting room. Lucas and Camilla came early, too early. I heard the door open before I'd even finished buttoning my sleeves. Their footsteps on the wooden floor had a rhythm I already knew, slow, careful, deliberate, the rhythm of people who have come with a purpose. "Good morning," I said, pretending not to notice the briefcase Lucas carried. "Morning, Dad," he answered, voice already wrapped in authority. "We thought we'd stop by, talk about a few things." Camilla followed, smiling politely as she placed a folder on the table, a different one this time, new papers, fresh ink. "We've updated the documents," she said. "Just a few adjustments, really. Everything's clearer now." "Clearer," I repeated, the word heavy on my tongue. "That's good. Clarity is important." They both sat. I stayed standing for a moment longer than necessary, watching the sunlight crawl across the tablecloth, revealing every wrinkle and stain, proof that time had passed, and we were still pretending it hadn't. Lucas opened the folder. "Dad, we've talked to the lawyer," he began. "It's just a matter of signing. Once we file this, everything will be properly in order. Your name, Mom's assets, the inheritance. It'll protect everyone." I looked at him. He was wearing the same watch I'd given him on his 30th birthday. The leather band had cracked near the buckle. "Whose lawyer?" I asked. He hesitated for half a second. "Ours," Camilla said smoothly. "He's very professional. We trust him." I nodded. "I see. You trust him." The room fell quiet. The clock ticked behind us, stubborn as ever. I sat down slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees, not from age, but from restraint. I pulled the folder closer. The scent of ink and paper hit me. It smelled like bureaucracy and betrayal. "I'd like to read it," I said. Lucas sighed, almost theatrically. "Dad, we've been through this. You don't need to read every line. We explained it." "I remember," I said, flipping through the pages anyway. "But explanations are temporary. Signatures are forever." Camilla's tone softened, but only on the surface. "We're just trying to protect what's rightfully ours. Mom would have wanted things to be fair." That sentence, "Mom would have wanted to," cut deeper than any accusation. Helena's name didn't belong in this conversation. She was the one person who never asked for anything but honesty. I could almost hear her voice in my head, quiet but firm. "Don't let them turn love into paperwork." I kept turning pages, legal jargon blurred into repetition, clauses, transfers, power of attorney. The phrases started stacking into meaning. By the 5th page I saw it. My name listed as grantor, theirs as beneficiaries, immediate control of assets, unrestricted authority in case of mental or physical incapacity. I felt a chill slide down my spine. "Incapacity," I whispered. "That's a convenient word." Lucas leaned forward. "It's just standard language. Don't make this dramatic." I looked up at him, really looked. His eyes weren't cruel, they were impatient, practical. The eyes of a man who had replaced affection with accounting. "You're very thorough," I said quietly. "I didn't raise a fool." He blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "Dad," he said again, lowering his voice, "you have to understand. We're not your enemies. We just need to make sure everything's protected for the family." "The family," I repeated. "Whose family are we protecting exactly?" Camilla's smile faltered. Lucas straightened his back. The air in the room thickened, invisible but suffocating. I closed the folder and pushed it back gently, like a chess player returning a piece he refuses to move. "When I was your age," I said, "I believed protection meant standing between people and danger, not taking what's theirs in case they stop breathing." Camilla's patience cracked. "With all due respect," she said, her tone suddenly metallic, "this isn't about taking. It's about efficiency. You're not getting any younger and—" "And what?" I interrupted. "You think I won't notice what you're doing?" Lucas's voice rose. "We're trying to help you. You're making it harder for everyone." "No," I said, calm again. "I'm making it harder for you to take what isn't yours." The silence that followed was alive. Camilla glanced at Lucas, expecting him to control himself, but he couldn't. His face flushed. "Do you even hear yourself? You're acting paranoid. We're your family." "Yes," I said softly. "That's what makes it hurt." I stood, my chair scraping the floor. The old wood moaned beneath me. I walked to the cabinet near the wall, Helena's cabinet, and opened the drawer. Inside, neatly arranged, were documents they didn't know I'd moved, copies, deeds, and a small sealed envelope with my lawyer's name on it. When I turned around, both their eyes were fixed on me. "You're not the only ones who can plan ahead," I said. Camilla blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, closing the drawer, "that before anyone starts transferring what doesn't belong to them, I'll be having a conversation with someone who still understands the law. And respect." Lucas stood abruptly. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" I asked. "Then why do your hands shake every time I say lawyer?" He looked down, hiding his fists in his pockets. The veins in his neck stood out. Camilla grabbed her purse, her voice now clipped. "We'll come back when you've calmed down." "Don't," I said. "Next time, bring your lawyer too. I'd like to meet the man who wrote incapacity into my name." They left without another word. The sound of the door closing was softer than I expected, almost merciful. For a moment I thought they'd turn back, say something human, but the silence stayed whole. I sat again. The papers lay there, open at the edges, trembling slightly from the draft of the closing door. I stared at them until the ink stopped swimming before my eyes. Then I folded the folder neatly, tied it with a rubber band, and placed it under a stack of old newspapers. The coffee on the table had gone cold. I drank it anyway. Bitterness felt right. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed by the window, the city flickering below me like a pulse I no longer shared. I realized then what had been haunting me for weeks. They didn't want to hurt me, not exactly. They just wanted me gone. To clear the board, to remove the obstacle between them and what they thought they deserved. I've faced men who've lied under oath, soldiers who'd betray orders to save themselves. But nothing ever cut as deep as seeing that same calculation in my son's eyes. I knew what I had to do, not with anger, but precision. I'd go see the lawyer who'd handled Helena's estate, quietly, without telling anyone. If they wanted a war of papers, they'd have to fight on my ground. The next morning, I ironed another shirt, steady hands, sharp creases. I shaved, polished my shoes. The reflection in the mirror looked back at me. Older, thinner, but still a soldier underneath. As I buttoned my collar, I caught myself whispering to the air, "Let's see who underestimates an old man first." The law firm smelled of paper and rain. A receptionist with neat hair led me down a quiet corridor where framed diplomas watched like patient witnesses. When the door closed behind me, I felt the first real silence I'd had in weeks. "Good to see you, sir," said Mr. Andrade, the attorney who handled Helena's affairs. He was older now, softer around the eyes, steady in the hands. "You said it was urgent." I placed the folder on his desk. "My son brought these. He says I need to set things right. He says the house and investments belong to Helena's side." He didn't answer. He took his time. He read, page by page, the way a careful man checks a rifle before dawn. Only once did he frown at a clause that used the word incapacity too easily. "Who drafted this?" he asked. "Their lawyer," I said. He nodded, kept reading, then opened a drawer and pulled out a worn brown file. He laid it gently on top of the new papers, as if placing history over noise. "This is Helena's file," he said, "and this," he tapped the old folder, "is the truth." He showed me certified copies, a settlement from years before our marriage, the dissolution of what remained of her family's estate, receipts closing the accounts her parents had once held. He turned to the property records, the deeds in my name, the dates matching the sales of the land my father left me. He showed statements, old faded ink, where my deposits built the portfolio brick by brick. None of it loud, all of it final. "Your wife's inheritance," he said, measured, "was resolved well before your wedding. She brought dignity, not money. The home you live in was purchased with proceeds from your family's land, and these investments were funded from your earnings and inheritance. That's what the records say." Something loosened in my chest, a knot I'd been carrying since the night garlic burned in my kitchen. Relief didn't come as triumph. It came as grief. I had wanted to believe my son was mistaken, not dishonest. "And the documents they brought?" I asked. He set the new pages aside. "Sloppy, aggressive, and dangerous. They seek sweeping control under the pretext of efficiency. If you'd signed, you'd have given immediate authority to transfer and encumber assets, especially if anyone alleges you're overwhelmed." He looked up. "Are you overwhelmed?" "Only by their impatience," I said. He allowed himself a small smile, then turned practical. "We'll take steps. First, do not sign anything not prepared here or reviewed here. Second, I'll prepare a notarized statement clarifying the origin of assets, with certified references to these records. Third, we instruct your banks, in writing, to refuse any new powers of attorney unless issued by me and confirmed by you in person. Fourth, we open a safe deposit box. Originals go there. You keep copies. I keep copies. The court keeps copies, if it comes to that." I listened the way I used to before a mission, quietly, with the feeling that breath itself had weight. "What about the noise?" I asked. "If they start talking, if they turn our table into a public trial, then we respond with documents, not volume," he said. "If they defame you, we collect proof, videos, posts, interviews. But we do not swing first. We build." He slid a pen toward me, not to sign away, but to initial a series of protective instructions. Each stroke felt like shoring up a levee before the flood. "Mr. Andrade," I said when the last page was done, "there's something else I need to know. If I stop paying their bills, the ones I've quietly covered for years, what happens?" He leaned back. "Legally, nothing. Morally, that's a different courtroom. But strategy often reveals character. If support was love's disguise, removing it will tell you who's in the room." "I thought so," I said. He packed the old file and the new documents into a clean grey folder and bound it with a red ribbon, the color of warnings. "This," he said, "is your history. Keep it close. I'll email certified scans by evening, return in a week. I'll have a full briefing prepared and a draft response should they attempt anything formal." I rose. The window behind him showed a city rinsed by rain, cleaner but not gentler. I shook his hand. It was warm and firm, the kind of handshake that means, "We stand." At the door, he added softer, "Your wife respected you deeply. She told me once, he builds quietly, that's why things last. Don't let noise undo architecture." The corridor felt longer on the way out. The receptionist slipped me a stamped envelope addressed to my bank manager, precaution wrapped as courtesy. In the elevator, I saw my reflection in the chrome. Older, yes, but not finished. Not by a long measure. Outside, umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers. I walked without one, the rain settling the ash that had been floating inside my chest. Cars hissed past, Somewhere a bakery warmed the air with the smell of butter and yeast. Somewhere a radio played a love song that didn't belong to me anymore. Back home, I laid the grey folder on the table where the war had started. I opened it, page by page, letting the lines speak. Dates, signatures, deeds, my life in ink. No trumpets, no fanfare, just the silent fact of having stood where others had only gestured. I took out my phone and typed short instructions to the utilities, the school, the insurance, the little subscriptions no one notices. Polite, final notices. Billing returned to the household that used them. Then I drafted one last message to my bank. No transfers without my presence. All requests through Mr. Andrade. When I finished, the house was quiet again. Not empty, just precise. I went to the piano, lifted the fallboard, and touched one key. The note rang true, despite the dust. "Helena," I said into the room that still held her shape, "we're going to do this the right way." I lowered the board gently, sat back, and listened to the rain find its rhythm against the glass. Somewhere beyond the door, impatience would soon turn to anger. But for the first time in months, I felt the floor under my feet as if the house itself had exhaled. Truth is not loud. It is exact. And now, so was I. With the truth secured, I removed the safety net. I stop paying their bills. What comes next won't be love. It will be proof. I didn't announce it. I just stopped paying. No speeches, no warnings. One by one, I shifted the weight that had quietly sat on my shoulders for years back to where it belonged. Their doorstep. The utilities, the car, the school fees, the health plan, every monthly kindness that wore the mask of silence, returned to its rightful name. The first sign came with the mailbox. A thin envelope with a red stripe, then a heavier one stamped "Second Notice." That evening, Lucas tossed them onto my table like accusation disguised as paper. "What is this?" he asked. "Mail," I said, pouring tea. "The electricity, the gas, the car lease, they're overdue." I nodded, let the spoon touch porcelain, ding, the sound of a small bell calling no one. "Then they should be paid." His jaw worked. "You've always paid them," he said, as if naming a law. "I did," I answered, quietly. While it was still mistaken for love, Camilla came in from the hall, phone in hand, face already arranged for outrage. "The bank says the transfer didn't go through." "It didn't," I said. Silence thickened, a slow fabric. Lucas dropped into a chair. The wood protested. "You can't just change things like this. We have a system." "No," I said. "You had a habit." He leaned forward. "We're counting on you. There are commitments. The car is your car," I said. "Your commitments, your name." Camilla's voice sharpened. "This is petty and cruel. You know we've been under pressure since Mom died." "Then adjust," I said. "The way I did." She laughed. Too bright, too thin. "Oh, of course. The hero speech." I let it pass. The kettle hissed. I poured my tea and watched the steam blur the window, remembering the day Helena taught me to breathe through rage, in, hold, out, like waves that refused to drown you. Day 3 brought the first escalation. Lucas called from the driveway. "They're taking the car," he said, voice sanded down to panic. "You need to cover this now. They made a mistake with the authorization." "No mistake," I said. "I cancelled the authorizations." "You what?" "A man protects where he bleeds," I answered, "not where he's ignored." He arrived 5 minutes later, red-cheeked, hair disordered by anger. "You're sabotaging your own family." "I'm refusing extortion," I said, calm. "Those papers you brought were a knife with a ribbon around it." His nostrils flared. "You're misreading everything. We were trying to—" "Help," I repeated, and the word tasted like rust. When help has a comma and a clause, it's called terms. Camilla stood in the doorway, recording nothing but seeing everything. "He wants us to beg," she said. "It's a power game." "No," I answered. "It's a mirror." Bills multiplied like leaves in a storm. The internet slowed, then died. The house that had once pulsed with constant scrolling now hummed with a different rhythm, the kind that comes when people are forced to hear their own breathing. They stayed quieter, not gentler. Resentment can mimic silence if you dim the lights enough. On day 7, the landlord of their apartment called me by mistake. "Mr. Lucas listed you as a reference," he said. "Payments delayed again." "Remove my name," I replied. "He's responsible." By day 10, strategy gave way to accusation. Lucas arrived with a phone camera set to record. "Let me be clear," he said. "If you don't restore the transfers, I'll tell everyone you've been hiding Mum's inheritance. I will make this public." I considered the small red light on his screen. A soldier knows when he has entered another battlefield entirely. "Truth travels slowly," I said, "but it arrives wearing documentation." He swallowed. "So that's it? You're going to watch us fall?" "I'm going to watch you stand," I said. "Or not. That choice was never mine." He left, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I took the grey folder from the drawer and set it on the table. Dates, deeds, statements, the quiet army I had been building while they rehearsed a speech. That night, the building's generator clicked during a quick blackout. In the sudden dark, I could hear their apartment through the pipes, voices tight, syllables sharp. "We should have made him sign then," Camilla hissed. "He'll fold," Lucas said, but the conviction broke on the last word. The next morning, I found Camilla in the kitchen, oddly cheerful. "Good news," she said brightly. "If you sign the updated documents, the bank will extend new terms. We can stabilize everything." I stirred my coffee. "So the pen solves hunger now." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. It's paperwork." "And if I sign," I said, "what happens next? Hypothetically." "We manage," she said, too quick. "We take this burden off you." "By taking it off me," I said, "or by taking it from me?" Her smile thinned. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said, "to the person who built it." I could have ended it there, keep the freeze, let reality finish the lecture. But something in me wanted the truth to show itself in daylight, where even liars squint. I wanted to see what love looked like with the volume turned off and the bank alerts turned on, so I made a decision that felt like stepping into a cold river. I would sign, not to surrender, but to observe. I would sign the harmless version, the one Mr. Andrade revised, narrow as a keyhole. Let them celebrate a victory that changes nothing. Let them discover, in the soft aftermath, that the inheritance they worship never existed, and that the well they covet has always been fed from a source they do not control. That afternoon, I called Mr. Andrade. "Prepare a limited consent," I said. "No transfers, no powers of attorney, no access to principal. Mirror rights, not ownership. Let them think the door is open." "And the point of this," he asked. "Exposure," I said. "Some truths don't reveal under arguments. They reveal under silence." He paused, then, "I'll draft it. Bring your pen, but not your trust." When I hung up, the house felt lighter in a way I didn't yet trust. I walked to the piano and lifted the fallboard. Dust rose like memory. I pressed a single key. The note held, thin, unwavering, the sound of something that refuses to be tuned by other hands. By evening, Lucas texted, "So?" "Tomorrow," I replied. There was no answer. Only the long space where expectation turns into appetite. I sign, on my terms. They celebrate like victors, and then the ground beneath them starts to give way because nothing in their story matches the documents, the banks, or the past. I signed the next morning. At 9 sharp, Lucas and Camilla arrived, dressed as if for a press conference. Lucas wore a jacket he hadn't touched in years. Camilla had her hair tied so tight it looked like resolve. They brought a notary, a woman with tired eyes who clearly knew she was witnessing a family pretending to be civil. The pen was mine, but the script was Mr. Andrade's. Tight, deliberate, armored in clauses that meant everything and nothing. I read every line, slow enough to make them restless. When I finished, I looked at them, satisfied. Lucas exhaled through his nose, victory curving his mouth. Finally, this will make everything smoother. Camilla leaned over the table, all sugar. You'll see, things will be peaceful now. No more tension. Peace, a word that always arrives after someone else's war. I signed. The pen scratched softly. No lightning struck, no music swelled. Just ink drying on paper that would soon reveal how shallow their triumph really was. The notary stamped, nodded, gathered the pages, and left. Camilla hugged me, too quick, too staged. Lucas patted my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. I smiled. Maybe the first time in a while. When they left, laughter trailed faintly down the hallway, light, confident, rehearsed. The kind of laughter people use when they think the story is over. But stories don't end with signatures. They begin there. The first week was quiet. No more questions about the bills. No sudden visits. I saw them only in the building's elevator, carrying new shopping bags, their voices floating with rehearsed cheer. By week 2, the cracks began to show. Lucas's tone shifted from warmth to calculation when he called. Dad, just confirming, the transfers will reflect next cycle, right? They should, I said evenly. If there's anything to transfer. Silence. A breath caught. What do you mean? I said, the documents you celebrated don't move money. They only confirm names. He didn't answer. I could hear Camilla whispering in the background, quick, nervous words. The line cut. By week 3, the celebration had turned to panic. I saw it first in the lobby. Camilla on the phone, pacing. What do you mean the accounts are frozen? He signed, he gave authorization. Her voice cracked like glass. The doorman pretended not to hear. I didn't pretend anything. That night, Lucas came to my door, pale and breathless. What did you do? What I said I would, I replied. A limited consent, mirror access, no control. You tricked us. No, I said, you misread me. There's a difference. He slammed his palm against the wall. The bank won't release the funds. They say the assets are under my name, but the management rights stay with you. That's what happens, I said, when people celebrate before they understand the fine print. Camilla appeared behind him, mascara smudged. You made us look like fools, she hissed. I didn't need to, I said. You managed that yourselves. She stepped closer, shaking. Do you know what people are saying? That you don't trust your own family, that you're paranoid. People are right, I said softly. I don't. Lucas pointed a trembling finger at me. You think this is over? We'll fix this. We'll go public if we have to. I looked at him, my son, trembling with the arrogance of someone who's never truly lost anything. You already are public, I said. Every act you've done is a declaration. He stared at me, jaw clenched, chest rising fast. Then he turned and left. Camilla followed, her perfume trailing like smoke behind a gunshot. Days passed. The silence they left behind had texture, thick, heavy, but oddly clean. I walked through the house, straightened the piano bench, watered Helena's plant. Life reduced itself to the essentials: food, air, proof. The phone rang less, except for one number. Mr. Andrade. The banks have confirmed, he said. They tried to access your accounts 3 times. It triggered an alert. We've secured everything. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I said. Let them see the bottom first. He paused. You understand what comes next, right? Pride doesn't fade quietly. I know, I said. But silence is sometimes the only way people hear. 2 weeks later, I heard from neighbors that Lucas had sold their car. Camilla's boutique project had closed. The elevator gossip traveled faster than truth ever could. I didn't feed it. Truth doesn't need a campaign. Still, I watched. From my window, I saw them walking faster, shoulders tense, voices low. They avoided my floor now. I didn't feel victory, just a strange stillness, like the air before a storm that's already done its damage. One night, a note appeared under my door. We need to talk. Please. No name, but I knew the handwriting. I placed it on the table beside Helena's photograph. The candle beside it flickered with the draft of the open window. She seemed to be watching me again, the way she used to when I wrestled with my conscience. Not yet, I whispered. Let them understand what they chose. The rain started again, light at first, then insistent. I closed the window, folded the note, and tucked it into the grey folder with the rest of the evidence. Patience isn't forgiveness. It's the pause between lessons. Tomorrow, I'd visit Mr. Andrade again. The time for silence was ending. It didn't begin with a headline. It began with a caption. A neighbor sent me a link late at night, a short video of Lucas standing in front of a neutral wall, speaking with a steadiness that wasn't his. Some men, he said, hide wealth that belongs to others. Not every hero in uniform is a man of honor. The phrase wasn't new, but on a screen it sounded like a verdict. Below, comments multiplied like flies. Camilla posted her own clip, eyes glassy, voice soft, rehearsed sorrow. We tried to resolve it as a family. The word rang in the kitchen while the kettle whistled. I muted the phone and watched steam bead on the window until it blurred the city into a watercolor. I could have answered then. 2 sentences, a scan, a date. But noise isn't the same as proof. And proof requires an audience that isn't screaming. The next day, they went bigger. A local blog ran a piece, "Widow's Fortune Withheld by Ex-Military Patriarch." A radio station called 3 times. The doorman wouldn't meet my eyes. In the elevator, a woman I'd known for 15 years stared at my shoes as if the guilt dripped from them. Shame doesn't need facts, it only needs direction. I took the long way home, past the bakery that smelled of butter and memory. When I reached my door, there were pamphlets shoved under it, ads for lawyers, mediators, reputation managers. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Reputation is the sound a man makes when he stands still. It isn't managed, it's defended. I called Mr. Andrade. "It's begun," I said. "I've seen the videos," he replied, voice calm, almost tired. "Let them speak. We'll collect. Send me the links, screenshots, timestamps. Do not engage. We will not argue online. We'll argue where the floor is made of wood and the ceiling of law." That afternoon, I became a clerk of my own life. I saved everything, posts, interviews, captions with their careful poison. I catalogued dates. I downloaded archives. The grey folder filled with a new weight, not past but ammunition. By evening, a reporter requested a comment. "We want your side," she said, eager, kind. "People are listening." "People are shouting," I answered. "Listening happens later." She paused. "I'm not like the others," she said. "I've been following cases like this." There was a steadiness in her tone that didn't ask for a confession. It asked for a record. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe. We sat by the window. She didn't switch on a camera, only placed a small recorder on the table, visible, honest. "I won't say much," I began, "but I will show you something." I handed her photocopies. Helena's settlement, the closing of her family estate, the deeds in my name, the dates of my deposits. "This is the spine," I said. "Everything else is meat." She read silently. Her eyes moved the way Mr. Andrade's had, line by line, without hunger. "Can I verify these?" she asked. "You must," I said. She nodded. "If they continue publicly, would you consider a statement?" I sipped my coffee. "My statement is paper," I said. "But if they force me into daylight, I won't come alone." When I left, the late sun had turned the street into a long stripe of gold. I walked slowly, breathing in the city the way you do when you've been holding your breath too long. On the corner, a boy practiced dribbling a soccer ball against a wall. Thump, the rhythm of persistence. Helena would have smiled. At home, the silence had changed. It felt like the pause before a verdict. A message blinked on my phone. Lucas again. "Last chance to fix this in private." There was a photo attached, the three of us at a summer barbecue, my arm around his shoulder, Helena laughing behind us, hair loose, head tilted toward sunlight. I stared at it for a long time. Fix this in private. I typed 2 words. Public Works. The next morning, Andrade called early. They did an interview, he said. Sloppy, contradictions everywhere. Camilla mentions an open trust that doesn't exist. Lucas names a bank account closed a decade ago, and they imply you're incapacitated. Incapacitated, I repeated. The word tasted like metal. He continued, we filed today. Injunction plus a defamation complaint. We'll request an immediate right of reply and preservation orders for their posts and interviews. If they delete anything, it will count against them. Do it, I said. He hesitated then. Are you ready to stand in court? Yes, I answered. I've been standing in my own house for months. On my way to the firm, I passed the park bench where Helena and I used to sit. A woman was there with a stroller, humming a lullaby I didn't recognize. The wind smelled of leaves and gasoline. I stopped for a moment, touched the back of the bench, and felt the wood, warm, solid, indifferent to rumor. At the office, Andrade had already prepared a clean stack. Petition, exhibits, annexes. Each page wore a small tab like a disciplined soldier. He talked me through the sequence. We lead with origin of assets, notarized, then the settlement dates, then bank letters, then their public statements, with timestamps. We request a protective order blocking any new attempt to access or alter your accounts without your in-person authorization, and we ask for a hearing as soon as possible. Will they come? I asked. They will, he said. Pride is punctual. I signed where he pointed. The pen left black, decisive lines, no tremor. When we finished, he closed the folder with a firm clap and looked at me as if measuring the weight of what was about to happen. From this point, he said, don't watch their feeds. Let me watch. Protect your quiet. You'll need it. I walked home without checking my phone. The city felt louder, but I was not. I boiled water. I wiped the table. I set Helena's photograph upright. The frame had tilted, maybe from the draft. We're almost there, I told her. That night thunder gathered far away, a low drum behind the clouds. I slept for the first time in days, a short, heavy sleep that didn't ask for dreams. In the morning, a headline waited at my door, printed this time, not glowing. Father fights back. Documents challenge viral claims. The article was clean, careful. It didn't absolve me. It did something better. It gave the dates. By noon, the court confirmed a hearing. I ironed a shirt, polished my shoes, packed the grey folder. And when I closed my door, I heard it, subtle, precise, the sound of fear on the other side of the hall, trying to become outrage. Let it try. The room we were walking into didn't care about volume. It cared about paper and eyes that still knew how to read. Court day. He speaks, I speak, and the papers speak loudest. The room breathes, the judge watches, and for the first time my son has to look at the dates instead of the camera. The courthouse smelled of dust and old paper, like truth left too long in drawers. I arrived early. Mr. Andrade met me at the entrance, his tie perfectly centered, his calm unshaken. We'll speak only when asked, he said. Let the documents do most of the talking. The hallway was long, full of murmurs. Reporters lingered near the steps, whispering names. A flash went off as I passed, but I didn't slow down. Attention used to mean respect. Now it meant curiosity dressed as justice. Inside the courtroom, time felt slower. Wood benches, high ceilings, the sound of shuffling paper. Lucas sat across the aisle, shoulders tight under a suit that didn't fit him. Camilla leaned close, whispering directions he pretended not to need. Her perfume reached even here, sharp, expensive, defensive. When the judge entered, the room shifted from gossip to gravity. He was older than I expected, his voice quiet but deliberate. We're here to discuss claims of misappropriation and defamation, he said. Let's keep order. Lucas's lawyer spoke first. A young man, polished, eager to prove himself. Your Honor, this is a case of deception within a family. My client's late mother left assets improperly withheld by the defendant, his father. We present statements and testimony establishing a pattern of concealment. He gestured toward me as if pointing to a problem on a board. Lucas kept his eyes on the table, rehearsed sadness fixed on his face. I watched him not with anger, but with a tired kind of pity. When our turn came, Andrade stood. No theatrics, no raised voice. He began with the dates. Your Honor, the plaintiff claims inheritance from the mother's estate. Here are the certified dissolution documents dated 15 years before the marriage. Here are the property deeds acquired by the defendant through the sale of paternal land. Here are tax records proving continued ownership and growth of those investments under the defendant's sole account. He placed each document carefully, one after another, like stones across a river. No sound, but paper meeting wood. Then he presented the digital prints, the videos, the posts, the interviews. Here, Your Honor, are statements accusing the defendant of theft and abuse of power. None supported by evidence, each shared publicly to thousands. We provide certified copies and timestamps. The damages speak in numbers larger than any inheritance. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Lucas, he said, were you aware of these documents before making your statements? Lucas hesitated. We were advised they weren't valid. By whom? He looked at his lawyer. We assumed. Assumptions, the judge interrupted, are not currency here. A faint ripple moved through the benches. Camilla stared at the floor, her hands gripping her purse like a flotation device. Andrade turned to me. Would you like to add anything, sir? I stood. My knees protested, but my voice did not. Only this, I said. My wife and I built everything we had from the ground up. She knew what I owned and never once called it hers. What destroys me isn't the accusation. It's that my son believed it so easily. I looked at Lucas. For the first time, he met my eyes. Behind the anger, I saw the thin film of fear, the moment when a man realizes the narrative he built cannot stand without scaffolding. The judge nodded slowly. This court does not judge feelings, Mr. Lucas. It judges evidence, and the evidence here is overwhelming. He turned to Andrade. Your documentation is thorough. I'll allow written submissions for damages and restitution. Lucas's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, if I may, you may not, the judge said simply. What we have here isn't confusion. It's fabrication. The gavel struck once, light, final. The room exhaled. Camilla began to cry silently. Lucas sat still, staring at the table as if it might reopen and swallow him whole. Reporters scribbled, cameras whispered clicks. But I didn't feel vindication. I felt something heavier, something like the ache after pulling a blade from your own skin. Andrade leaned toward me. It's done, he whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. No, it's beginning. Outside, the sunlight was brutal, too clean. The air buzzed with phones, voices, questions. I said nothing. Let them chase echoes. Truth doesn't sprint. It walks with documents in hand. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, a young reporter, different from the others, asked quietly, "What will you do now?" I looked past her, to the skyline, where glass buildings caught the light the way Helena's eyes used to. "Go home," I said, "and water the plants." She smiled, not understanding. Most people don't. They think justice ends in a verdict. It doesn't. It ends in stillness. When I reached my building, the doorman nodded. Not avoidance this time, but respect. In the lobby mirror, I saw my reflection clearer than I had in months. Older, yes, but lighter. The dust had finally settled. That evening, I placed the grey folder back on the shelf, front and center where it belonged. Not as a trophy, but as testimony, that a man's dignity, once tested, can survive even his own blood. And for the first time since Helena's funeral, I sat at the piano and played. The notes were clumsy, broken at first, but they found their rhythm, like an old march rediscovered. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the storm had finally spent itself. After the verdict, silence returned. Not the heavy kind that crushes you, but the quiet that comes when the noise finally burns itself out. The calls stopped. The reporters moved on. Even the neighbors, once eager to whisper, began greeting me again cautiously, as if testing the air. I learned through Mr. Andrade that Lucas and Camilla had left the city. They sold what little they still owned to pay the damages. The law was merciful in its language, but cruel in its arithmetic. Pride is expensive, and they were bankrupt long before the court confirmed it. There was no satisfaction in it, only the dull ache of something ending without grace. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance, the kind of distance that lets wounds turn into scars you can live with. Days began to find rhythm again. Morning coffee, a walk to the park, feeding the pigeons near the bench where Helena and I once sat. The air had weight again, the kind that reminds you you're still here. Sometimes I passed by the cafe where the journalist had first met me. She waved once through the window, a silent acknowledgement that truth, for once, had won. Her article had been measured, honest. It didn't paint me as a hero. It simply told the story straight. A father accused, a son mistaken, a name restored. That was enough. At home, I began clearing space. Old receipts, unneeded files, clothes I hadn't worn since Helena's last birthday. I kept only what spoke to me, her letters, the piano, the plant by the window that somehow refused to die. It had been drooping for months, but now new leaves had started pushing through. Life is stubborn like that. One afternoon the phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but I recognized it before answering. Lucas. His voice was smaller than I remembered. "Dad," he said, "I know you don't owe me anything, but I needed to hear your voice." I didn't speak at first. The sound of rain filled the silence between us. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I don't even know how it went that far." "You do," I said quietly. "You just don't like the answer." He exhaled. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Then we understand each other," I said. "Take care of yourself." He started to say more, but the line broke, whether by choice or by distance. I couldn't tell. I set the phone down, not angry, not relieved, just finished. That night, I wrote my new will. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Half would go to veterans projects, the rest to scholarships in Helena's name. Let the money do what people failed to, help without taking. Mr. Andrade witnessed the signature, smiling faintly. "You're closing circles," he said. "Or maybe drawing new ones," I replied. He nodded. "That's what survival is." When he left, I walked through the house, turning off lights one by one. The walls felt lighter, almost forgiving. On the piano, a layer of dust had gathered again, but this time it didn't bother me. Dust is just proof of time that hasn't been wasted. I sat down and pressed a single key. The sound filled the room, soft and whole, not triumph, not sorrow, just truth vibrating in wood and air. I thought of Helena, of Lucas as a child, of the first house I built with my father's hands, of how easily love becomes ownership and how dignity is the only inheritance that can't be stolen. The rain eased outside, turning to mist. I opened the window and let it in. The city smelled clean for the first time in months. Somewhere far away, a church bell rang, a small, stubborn reminder that some rhythms outlast every storm. I took a deep breath, slow and deliberate. The war was over. The house, finally, was quiet. But I wasn't the same man who had sat at that dinner table months ago, holding a fork like a shield. That man had been waiting for peace to return. This one had learned to make it himself. And in that quiet, I whispered, not to Helena, not to anyone in particular, but to the version of me that had survived, "You did not lose. You endured." The words felt strange in my mouth, not because they were untrue, but because I finally believed them. Outside, the last drops of rain tapped against the glass like an old friend knocking gently to say goodbye. Tomorrow I'd visit the veterans' shelter to deliver the first donation. Tomorrow the papers would become action. Tomorrow I'd start the kind of rebuilding that doesn't require walls. But tonight I would sit a little longer, let the piano cool, and listen to the silence breathing beside me, alive, forgiving, mine.